Well, hello, good morning. How are you all? I hope you guys are doing great. I hope you're having a great day. So, my day has started off just a little rough. My idea was to get out into the garden fairly early before it gets hot and do a little video on pruning your tomatoes. But apparently, the dog, Mr. Jax, had other plans, so he decided to go after a skunk this morning that had snuck its way into the yard. And so he has been sprayed, and so I've been researching how to get the smell of a skunk off your dog, and so ended up making some kind of concoction with baking soda and hydrogen peroxide and dish soap. So we'll see. It's on him soaking right now, so after it is soaked for a few minutes, I'll pause this and go rinse him off. But oh my goodness, y'all, he smells horrendous. Anyway, so today we're going to be pruning some tomatoes. If you want tomatoes that are healthy and vibrant and produce nice big fruits, then pruning your tomatoes is the way to go. If you don't care how big your tomatoes are and whether your plant is healthy or not, then you can just plant them and let them go. You'll still probably get some fruit, but I don't know how long it's going to take before disease strikes your plant or how big your fruits are going to be, because they're not going to be very big. So the reason most people prune plants is to, number one, increase airflow throughout the plant, because whenever the plant gets a lot of foliage on it, airflow is significantly decreased, and when there's no airflow, there's a lot of moisture, there's gnats flying around. And where there's a lot of moisture, it promotes disease, especially blight and fungus type things. So, and now there's a bee. I'm not the only one in the garden this morning. So anyway, I'm going to show you how to do that this morning. And so the first thing that you need to determine is it a kind of tomato plant that needs to be or will benefit from pruning? If it's an indeterminate variety, then yes, it will benefit from it and it will do your fruit good to prune it. If it is a determinate variety, then no, it's best not to prune those. The only time I prune my determinate varieties is when they start getting real thick and heavy with foliage, and I will prune those sometimes to kind of increase the airflow and decrease the amount of foliage that is starting to be produced. Cherry tomatoes are kind of controversial. Some people say to prune them and some people say not to. So I'm kind of one of those people that is in between. I don't prune mine to the point that I do the full size indeterminate tomatoes, but I do prune them some. Just because they're already small, and so you're not going to get big fruits on those anyway. But it does affect the flavor, because whatever is on that plant is where the energy is going to go. So if you have a lot of foliage, if you have a lot of growth in the stems and in the foliage, and then you've got fruit, that plant has to divide the energy up between all of the fruit, all of the foliage, all of the stems, all of the flowering. So all of the energy that the sun provides is going to have to be divided up. But if you significantly cut down on what that plant has, if you take out some of the foliage, now you don't want to take it all out or your plant can't go through the process of photosynthesis, and that's what actually produces the energy in the plant. So cut down on some of the foliage by pruning what we call suckers, and I'll show you what that is here in just a minute. And that way the energy that is produced in the plant can focus on what is left, which is fruit production and fewer leaves. So divide up the energy that the plant has wisely. So I'm going to go rinse this dog off, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to get started. Okay, well that turned out to be way more of a mess than I even dreamed it was possible. So anyway, the dog is rinsed and hopefully smelling better. We'll see after he dries. Right now he's running wild in the yard. So let's get back to tomatoes, and I'll show you guys how to start pruning your tomatoes. Okay, so the first thing that I think I'm going to focus on is the bottom of the tomato plant, which is what touches the ground. So if you have leaves and foliage touching the ground, that definitely needs to go. Anything that is touching the dirt and or the mulch, whatever it is that you have under the tomato, is going to produce, is not going to produce, but is going to be susceptible to disease. So you always want to trim off the bottom and make sure that none of that foliage is touching the ground. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to look at is not the suckers, but what's touching the ground. So whatever is touching the ground is susceptible to disease because it's in contact with dirt and or mulch, whatever you have under your tomato, and that's where living bacteria live. So it is always susceptible to disease if it is touching the ground. So the first thing you want to do is start from the bottom. Start from the bottom and work your way up. Trim off anything that is touching the ground and trim off anything. I like to trim off anything that is probably about the first 8 to 10 inches. I don't leave anything on the plant from about 8 to 10 inches down. Now, if it's a small plant, you don't want to trim it like that just yet, but eventually we will get to that 8 to 10 inches. So let's start trimming. Okay, so we're going to start with this one. First thing you need to do is look at what tomato plant you're dealing with so you'll know if it's a determinate or an indeterminate. And this one is actually a cherry tomato. This is the yellow pear. The yellow pear cherry tomato. So I'm not going to trim a whole lot of suckers off, but I am going to trim all of this bottom stuff off that's touching the ground. And see, this one's already got dirt all over it where we got some rain and all of that was touching the ground. So I know that if you all are like me, you are going to be so tempted to do this with your fingers instead of get some snips, because I do it all the time. So I'm going to tell you not to do it like that just because that's best practice, but I know you're going to do it anyway. So I'm going to show you a better way to do it with your fingers instead of pulling it down. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this sucker, and not because it's a sucker, but because it's on the bottom. So I'm going to get that out of the way first, just because those are so easy to pull off. So this one right here has got to go. So don't ever get a hold of a stem and pull it down, because it will rip it and it'll go down. But if you can go up with it and listen for the snap, when you hear it snap, it's broke loose. And then it's safe to remove. And then there's one on the other side too that's actually bending down. Let's go to the other side. Anytime a sucker starts growing, like this one right here, let me get a side angle. See how it's growing in what I call the armpit? So anytime that happens, it causes the branch that is below to shoot down. And so when that happens, if it's a lower branch, then it may bend down so much it touches the ground. So I will actually snip a little bit off of the end of those to prevent those from touching the ground. And that's it with that one. Now see how that has opened it up and it looks a lot better? Okay, so this is the German Johnson tomato. It is an heirloom and it is an indeterminate variety. So I'm not only going to trim off the bottom, but I'm also going to look for suckers that are unwanted. So what I like to do is have 1 or 2 main vines, and this is the main vine right here. So anything growing off of it that is growing in what I call the armpit, then I'm going to take that off, because that is a sucker, and a sucker will turn into a main vine. So I'm going to remove that. When they're small like this, you can just pinch it with your fingernail. If you've got a fingernail. If you don't, get some scissors. They break off really easy when they're that small. Over here's another one. Let me get closer. See how it's growing in the armpit there? Snip that off. My fingernail. This one way down here on the bottom is not a sucker, but it is growth that I don't want because it's too far down to the bottom. Same with this one. This one. It's hard to hold the camera and trim at the same time. So I don't see any more suckers. Well, as usual, I did not get to finish the video yesterday. That happens to me all the time. You guys will find that pretty quick. But by the time you see it, everything will be all together in one nice little package, one video. So that's okay. I mean, I just always expect that it's going to take me a little while to get a video together sometimes. And sometimes it takes me a week to get it edited just because I don't have a whole lot of spare time. I work full time and I have a full-time garden. But I really enjoy doing the garden. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I'm going to try to finish this video up today. I've already showed you how to prune the indeterminate, I think. What did I show you yesterday? I think I showed you. I'll have to look back and see what I showed you now. So I think it's the cherry tomato I need to show you how to prune, and the determinate tomato. So I do prune those, but I don't prune them anything like I prune the indeterminate tomatoes. So I'm going to show you how to prune those real quick. I actually already showed you a video of one cherry tomato, but since I've done this video, we'll show you this one too. So all of them will get trimmed off of the ground. So all of the bottom leaves on all of them, no matter what kind they are, will be trimmed on the very bottom until there are no leaves touching, and even just a little bit more. So I've already showed you how to do that. So now I'm going to move on to a cherry tomato and show you how I will prune that. Now this one here is a cherry tomato also. This is a super sweet 100. So again, I'm going to start at the bottom. This one, see how it is shooting down because it already has a sucker growing out of the little armpit there. So I'm going to trim that one off. And this time I left the sucker growing on that one. So this one already has tomatoes forming right here, if you can see those. There. Now I don't think this one needs thinned out any more than it already is. So that's all I'm going to do to that one. So you can see I do a lot less trimming on the cherry tomatoes than I do on the indeterminates. The indeterminates, I really want them growing on 1 or 2 main vines. And that's all I want on those. That way I have a lot more energy going toward individual tomatoes and making them big and tasty. Okay, so this last one here in the row of tomatoes is a Bella Rosa. It is a determinate variety. So I'm going to show you how I trim those. So again, the first place I'm going to start is on the bottom. Anything that is touching the ground or close to the ground is got to go. Get that one out of the way first so I can actually see. And this one is touching the ground right here. Is not really big just yet, so I'm just going to cut off a few of these, or a portion of that. Now, you always back up and look at it. There's one touching the ground on the other side. So now there's nothing left touching the ground. And this tomato is not very big. It's not very bushy. So that is actually all I'm going to cut off of this one. This is a determinate variety. The number of tomatoes and the size that this tomato will grow is already determined. So it will not continue to grow all season like the indeterminates. And that's all I'm doing on that one. As the season goes on, if this starts to become so bushy that it does not have a lot of airflow, then I will go ahead and trim it again. So you can see on this plant right here where the suckers came in at. So this was one of the armpits that what I call armpit. And so this started off as a sucker. You can see it's getting pretty big now and it's turning into a main vine. This here was the same way. I can get the leaves out of the way. Get a different angle. That one. So this one right here, that was a sucker also. You can see where it started growing in the Y, or in the armpit as I call it. And so that is also turning into a main vine. So I have left those on the determinate variety, and that's what this is. Let me back up so that's what this tomato plant is. This is a determinate variety, and it will turn into more of a bush style instead of a vine that just keeps growing up and up and up. The size is determined and the number of tomatoes is predetermined. So everything on a determinate variety of tomato is already predetermined. So you don't want to trim off all of the suckers on a determinate variety, or you are going to cut back significantly on the tomatoes that you get. Okay, just a real quick edit. Just for clarification purposes, I'm just going to draw a quick little diagram on this piece of paper just to show you the different parts of the tomato, how it grows, where the sucker grows, where the tomatoes and the flowers originate, and that way it'll just give you a better idea of what you're pruning whenever you start to prune, and that way you won't end up pruning off your tomatoes. Keep in mind, I am not an artist, so this is not going to be an artist rendering of a tomato plant, so just keep that in mind. So here's how your tomato will grow. So this will be your main stem. And then you'll get some leaves maybe growing out this way. So this is your leaves. See, I told you I wasn't an artist. So this will be your leaf stem. Let me zoom in just a little. And then your main vine will just continue to grow. And then from your main vine is where your tomatoes will grow from. Your tomatoes do not grow from a leaf stem. All tomatoes will be attached to the main vine, and it will be just a little stem. It really don't look like a leaf stem anyway. It would be hard to mistake it. So it will start growing, and then it will just start producing little buds from that. And it's usually going to be a little cluster of them that grows. How do you like that drawing? Anyway, so this is your main stem. This is a leaf stem. Some people call them sun catchers because the leaves is what catches the sun and will produce photosynthesis. And so at some point, say you've got some leaves growing on this side. I'll just draw some quick little leaves because I can't draw anyway, so I need to just quit trying to do a good job. Let's just say this is a leaf or a sun catcher, whatever you want to call it. And then in the little armpit, I call it an armpit, some people call it a crotch, but it's really called an axil. So in the axil of this plant, you will start to see growth, and it will look like a little miniature stem, and that is your sucker. So, and that's what you need to try to keep pruned off if you're growing an indeterminate variety. Now on the determinate varieties, you're going to just want to let those grow for the most part because the size of the plant, the amount of tomatoes that it produces and all of that is already predetermined. So anyway, that's not much of a good drawing, but hopefully that'll give you an idea of how the tomato grows. So your tomatoes will always be growing on the main vine, and a sucker will turn into a main vine if you allow it to grow. And I know that what you're thinking, I know you're thinking, well, if the tomatoes are growing off the main vine, don't I want another main vine? Well, only if you want to share that energy. If you want bigger tomatoes, tastier tomatoes, then you want to concentrate on the ones that you already have. If you don't care about the number, if you don't care about flavor and size, then sure, you can let all the suckers grow and you'll probably have more tomatoes, but they'll be smaller and they won't be as flavorful. Anyway, there you have it. Well, that's about all I've got to say about tomatoes. This video has taken me about 3 weeks to finish, and I am so sorry. I meant to get this out so much sooner, but between the dog getting sprayed and my daughter getting married this past Friday, 2 days ago, it has just been a whirlwind of events. And then Father's Day was today, so I'm actually out in the garden at the end of the day after my kids have already been to visit to try to finish up this video for you all. So if I have missed anything, please overlook me. It's been it's been quite the chore to get this video done. So you all please let me know if I have told you everything that you want to know about pruning tomatoes. So give me some feedback in the comments so I could maybe do better in the future with my videos. So, and let me know if there is anything else that you would be interested in me doing a video on. So next up is just going to be a little short garden tour of the garden, and I'll do that tomorrow while I'm off before I get back to work. So I hope you all have a great day. God bless you.